welcome back. My name is Lexi Jong, and here I like to talk about luxury makeup. And today I'm going to give you my full opinion on the new Gucci primer and foundation after 5 days of wear. I already have a video up with first impressions, so if you're interested in that, I will have that linked above and down below in the description box. And I think before we go over actual product characteristics, I'm going to show you a little clip of today's application so you can get an idea of what it looks like. So when I'm going over some of the characteristics that Gucci claims, you can kind of see for yourself what it looks like. And I also have a wear test included and everything as well. We'll go over that afterwards. First, let's start off with today's application. All right, so we're gonna get started with applying the primer first. So I've got some on my fingers here, and I'm just gonna spread this in. And it feels like a lightweight lotion. So here's half the face. You can compare it to the half without the primer. And let me just wait a second so the redness from touching goes down, and then I'll show you so you can see how it blurs. All right, so here we go. You can see that I definitely have more of a blurring effect there, and there is a little bit of a glow here. To the touch, the primer feels silky smooth. It feels dry, but not like it's dried out type. It just feels like, you know, like silky smooth and comfortable. So kind of like a lightweight gel moisturizer has just set in. So I applied the primer to the rest of my face, and now I'm going in with the foundation and I'm shaking it up. This is shade 120N. This is one pump. So I'm going to start with one side at a time, and I'm using the Suku foundation brush. So you can see coverage. And then let's add a little more. Okay, so here's the difference. Just gonna do the rest of my face. So that was basically one pump. I have this much left on my hand. And I'm gonna let this sit for a minute. Now, this is a foundation that can be powdered, but doesn't need to be. Either way, it looks good. I'm gonna go ahead with the Gucci powder. So I'm taking this Isononyl Master Face into the Gucci powder, and I'm just getting a little bit on the brush. And I'll just powder the one side first so you can see how it goes. I don't have any concealer on. So here it is with a light coat of the powder. This should be translucent. And here it is without. And I've done wear tests both ways. The powdering doesn't seem to make a difference for longevity. As a matter of fact, as you are wearing the powder, once it starts to break down, having the powder on top of it actually looks a bit worse as the foundation breaks up. But I think when you first apply it, those early hours, I think it looks better with the powder. While I have you in close, we're going to go ahead and add the Gucci bronzer. I have shade 01 Fair, and I'm using the Chikuhodo F04 brush. And I'm going to apply this in place of blush today. Okay, I'm gonna finish my makeup and then we'll go over details. Let's start off with the primer. So the primer retails for $59. Right now it is available on Gucci.com. This is the box that it comes in. So you've got your typical like kind of dusty peachy pink shade that Gucci uses, and black over the rest of the box. It's 30 milliliters and it is made in Italy. All the ingredients are linked down below in the description box if you're interested. So this primer, it claims to be a universal non-sticky formula, and it's suitable for all skin types. It glides on smoothly to even tone and plump skin while creating a natural finish with a soft glow effect. It's lightweight, blurs lines and pores, and is imbued with a spherical powder to provide a silky application. And I have to say that I find all of that to be very accurate. This primer, it feels like a lightweight gel moisturizer. That's sort of the texture that it has. And you could see during the application, you know, how easily it goes on. And it really, it definitely feels like it evaporates rather quickly. So it definitely feels water-based. And it is water-based. The very first ingredient in here is water. And you can tell, you put that on, it smooths on well. And when it dries down, it doesn't leave any sort of texture on your skin. It leaves your skin feeling silky smooth, but it doesn't feel as though you have product on there. It's definitely very lightweight, and I find it to be very comfortable. It's a very nice primer. Now, I have tested this primer with other foundations as well, just to kind of see how the primer works on its own. And I think it's a very nice primer. My favorite primer is the Taurate Perfectionist primer, and that is mostly because it provides a really nice mattifying effect for sunscreen. So when I put my sunscreen on, my face gets a little like greasy and so forth. Then adding the Taurate primer really kind of cancels that out. I have to say the Gucci one does a very nice job of that as well. It's not drying. It does provide some extra longevity to your foundations. However, I don't find, if you're somebody who really needs to get a lot of prolonged wear from a foundation, I don't think this will do that. I think it does extend the wear. It keeps your foundation looking fresh, and it's very comfortable. It's not drying to the skin, but it's not super long wearing, if that makes sense. Now, both the primer and the foundation both have a very strong fragrance to them. If you're familiar with other Gucci products, they all have this strong floral scent. If you are familiar with the Gucci powder or the bronzer, this is definitely the same scent as that. However, those, I find it to be a little bit less noticeable, and I believe it's because it's a powder product. So you put that on, you're smelling it, and it kind of dissipates. Whereas the primer and the foundation, because they're liquid, it's a little bit more intense at first. And as it dries down, it dissipates, but it takes a little while for that smell to go away. So I don't know if it's just me getting used to it or if it really fades that much, but I would say it takes at least 10 minutes or so for the scent to fade away where I'm not smelling it on my face any longer. Another claim for this primer is that it has a soft glow effect. I would say that's pretty minimal. When I think of a soft glow effect, I think of a little bit more glow than what I'm getting from this primer. There's a little bit, but it's definitely very subtle. And to me, I feel like this helps provide more of a satin matte finish. They're calling it a natural finish, and I find that to be a pretty accurate description. But if you had to describe it in terms of glowiness and so forth, I think kind of like a touch of satin is an apt description. And just a note, but both the primer and the foundation have a shelf life of approximately 12 months. And the foundation comes in a box just like the primer. They look the same. Make sure you read your labels. And again, I will have ingredients listed down below in the description box. Just like the primer, this is 30 milliliters. Both bottles are the same frosted glass heavyweight bottles, and we've got the same blush paint cap and dispenser. So I think it's a very nice package. It looks really nice, you know, very luxe and so forth. Now, finish-wise, this is described as a natural finish foundation. And as you can see from the application, this is going to be a lightweight, thin, sort of a serum foundation. It's a slightly thicker than a serum foundation. I think texturally, it's most similar to this Clé de Peau Radiant Fluid Matte Foundation. So this foundation is also thin. They're probably about the same viscosity. And as a matter of fact, I also found that the two of them have a very similar finish on the skin. So they are probably the most two similar foundations that I have in my collection. And I would have to say that they're both kind of more of a satin matte finish. So you've got more of that matte look with a little hint of glow. And I would say that the Clé de Peau is slightly more matte, than the Gucci. Now this foundation comes in 40 shades, so they have quite a good shade range here. And it retails for $68. Again, it's available on the Gucci website right now. And it is stated to be lightweight, long wearing. It has soft focus powder technology that transforms texture for effortless and precise application. It has advanced polymer technology to create a non-greasy blurring effect, and it provides subtle hydration to the skin with the use of glycerin and some products of natural origin. So I would definitely agree that this foundation is lightweight, and you could see during the application that the very first layer you put on is sheer. This is a buildable foundation, and you definitely want to go in with light sheer layers, let it dry for a second before adding another one, and that will create a beautiful finish. However, I don't think this is buildable all the way up to full coverage. I think the most you're going to get from this is medium, and I still think it's on the lighter side of the medium range. It's a very nice foundation overall, and we'll talk more about my opinions after we go over the wear test. So let's go ahead, let's go through the wear test now. And what I did with the wear test is I did one side with the primer and one side without. And then when we meet back up, I'm gonna go over some of the other trials I did. And I didn't film them because I thought who wants to watch that might be kind of boring. So I will go over the results of them though. Okay, we are going to do a primer test with foundation. So I am starting off with a little bit of the Gucci primer. I'm gonna put this on the right side of my face. All right, so there is just the primer. Let's let this sit for a second. All right, so the primer has dried. It's been about 10 seconds or so, but here we have, that nice silky feeling to the skin. My skin feels very smooth and silky on the side of the primer. Feels normal over here. So what do you think? Do you notice any blurring? I feel like I definitely see some blurring. So now we're going to apply the Gucci foundation. I have shade 120N, which is fair neutral. And let's see how this goes. Okay, so I'm going to use a smaller brush today. This is the, I believe F07 or F07 from Kyoto. So there's one layer. I'm just going to add a little bit more to the cheeks. All right, so here's coverage. Now let's do the side without the primer. All right, so that was actually my full pump. I'm just gonna add a tiny, tiny bit more to this side here. So I feel like I still have a little bit more redness. And I think that's actually a function of the primer. I think it's really just that the primer did truly blur some of that and it looks more even and more smooth versus this side without it. So not that this side looks bad, but I do think it looks better with the primer. You can see I let it dry there. Let me add a little more and try and smooth that out. So here we go with the primer and without the primer. And I will check in with you later. We're going to do a wear test. All right, so I am back and it has been 6 hours since I applied everything and just wanted to show you how things are wearing. This side here, my right side, has the primer on and the foundation. And I used a cream blush today, the Kjaer Weis cream blush in Blossoming. So I don't have any powder or anything on the cheek. It still feels the same way it did when I applied it. So it's dry to the touch. There's no oil peeking through. And this is the texture. So I think it's held up pretty well. This side here without the primer, there has been a little fading of the pigment there, and you can kind of see, you know, the areas that are kind of missing the pigment. And I haven't really, you know, had contact with my face. My kids weren't touching it today. I wasn't touching it. So it's just kind of worn off on its own today, and just a little bit of fading in the cheeks. So overall, I think the side with the primer looks a bit smoother and the coverage is a little bit fuller with the primer versus the side without. But I think both of them still look very natural and they have both held up decently well. Now, texturally, the side, neither of them feel greasy or dry or anything. You know, this feels very silky smooth like it did after I put the primer on. This side feels a little bit more moist than that, but not to the point where I would say like it feels greasy or anything. It's just in comparison with the primer side that I would notice it. If I were just doing this, you know, just the foundation, no primer, I don't think I would be able to tell a difference. But having them side by side, I can tell that there is a little bit more, I can't even really call it tackiness because it's so slight, but it is a little bit more tacky or dewy on this side without the primer. And again, it really just, it's so minimal that you can barely tell difference. Okay, it has now been 10 hours. This is the side without primer. This is the side with the primer. And I do see a difference between both sides. So the side with the primer has definitely held up better. And you can see that it still has that blurring effect going on. There has been a little bit of fading here, but it's not that bad. And then without the primer, you can see that it has really worn off a lot in the cheek area. So, and again, I haven't really had much, you know, contact with my face throughout the day. So this is just wearing off on its own. So as you can see, using the primer with the foundation is definitely more beneficial. I think they work really well together. And as a matter of fact, I think that this foundation on its own is really not that great. It's not that long wearing. So it really does benefit from having a primer underneath. It doesn't have to be the Gucci primer. I have tried my Taurate primer with it as well, which also helped with longevity and so forth. But I think the Gucci one, they really pair well together. And I think the finish that you get on your skin using them together is just a little bit more perfected. So I think they are a great duo, and I would definitely recommend using the two of them together. Now, as to my thoughts on the primer, as I mentioned, I did use this primer with other foundations as well, and it definitely worked. It's a nice primer. I do think that this primer, again, you know, it's really suitable to work well with the Gucci foundation. It works very well with other things as well, but I do think that there are primers out there that are just as good as the Gucci primer. So if you did not pick up the Gucci primer, or you're not interested in picking up the Gucci primer and you already have something that you love, I think it is definitely, you know, it's not a necessity. Keep going with what you have and love already. If, however, you're very interested in the Gucci foundation and you're looking for a primer to go with it, I do recommend pairing them together if you're in the market for a primer. Now, as for the foundation itself, I think it gives you a beautiful finish to the skin. I do think that the term natural finish is a pretty apt descriptor for this foundation. But if you had to describe it in terms of glowiness, satin, matte, and so forth, I do think it is more of a satin matte formula here. And I think it's very nice. It looks great for the first few hours, but I don't find it to be long wearing with or without the primer. It's still not as long wearing as other foundations that I have and love. With the primer, it definitely, you know, you can definitely get a lot more wear out of it. You could see during the wear test that I still got like a full day's worth of wear out of it, and it looked nice. Now, I have tried this with and without setting it with powder. And what I have found is when I set the foundation with powder, it looks great on the skin and it stays looking great for a few hours. But as that foundation starts to wear off, then you start seeing like the, the powder separation and so forth. So it doesn't look as great when it is wearing off. So if you're going to be wearing this foundation for a shorter period of time, I definitely would recommend setting it with powder for more of a flawless finish, but it's not necessary. Now, I think both the primer and the foundation do give a really nice blurred effect on the skin, and I think that it's a nice lightweight formula, and it provides light to light medium coverage. So I think, if you're in the market for something like that, it is very nice. Now on the skin, it really does stay non-greasy, even like with sweating and so forth. You get, it's really not a greasy foundation. It's not a greasy primer. It stays pretty true to how it feels when you first apply it throughout the day. So I think that is a really nice benefit of these, and I think they work really well together for that. One more thing I wanted to note about the primer is you can also use the primer just on its own to give your skin a natural blurring effect. You don't have to use it before a foundation. And if you're somebody with oilier skin and you're looking to prevent shine and so forth, but maybe you don't feel like wearing makeup, or maybe you want to wear a little bit, this primer does seem to help with that. Now, in my opinion, I don't think that this foundation is going to be great for drier skin tones. I just feel like on days when my skin is a little bit drier, for example, I put this on one day after it was later in the day. My skincare had been sitting, my skin was a little bit more on the dehydrated side, and it really did accentuate any dryness in my skin. It just doesn't have that, beautiful silky effect that it does on super hydrated skin. So I do think that if your skin leans naturally dry, that this foundation may not be the best for you. But I think with anybody from, well, I have normal skin type, and I believe that with oilier skin types, maybe not super oily, but I think if you're like a little oily combo, this would still work. Normal would still work. Normal is slightly dry will still work. But I think drier skin types in general, you probably won't like this one. And again, I may be completely wrong about that. So if you have a specific skin type and it worked for you, please let me know. I'd love to know how this foundation has performed on different people and what your thoughts are on this. Now, as for my final thoughts, if you are interested in this foundation and you are in the market for a primer, then I would recommend pairing this primer with this foundation because I find that the formulas really work well together. However, if you already have a primer that you love and use with other foundations and you're very happy with it, there is no need to buy this additional primer. If you are interested in a lightweight primer for use without makeup, I think it gives a really nice kind of blurring effect on your skin and helps control a little bit of oil and shine on your skin even without makeup. If you don't mind the scent, this could be something nice for days when you don't feel like wearing makeup. So it kind of depends what you're in the market for. Now, as for the foundation itself, I personally would not pick this up without using a primer. So if you're somebody who does not like to use a primer at all, I wouldn't recommend this foundation because it just doesn't last long enough, in my opinion. I feel like it starts to break up a little too quickly and the finish just doesn't stay as beautiful long enough without a primer. Personally, I find it to be pretty similar in appearance to the Clé de Peau foundation. And if I had to pick between the two of them, even though the Clé de Peau is more expensive, I would pick the Clé de Peau because I just feel that it lasts a bit longer on my skin and it provides a little bit more coverage. So for me personally, I think the Clé de Peau is a little bit better. They are both scented. The Clé de Peau, the scent isn't quite as strong as the Gucci scent. If you do not like fragrance in your products, do not try the Gucci. You will hate them. Now, do I regret purchasing the Gucci primer or foundation? No, I do not. I have them. I will use them. They give a really nice finish, but I'm not going to use them on days when I plan on having makeup on for a very long time period. In that case, I will go with something that's a little bit more long wearing. Now, as for the shade selection, I have shade 120N, which is the fair neutral. And If you typically wear a neutral shade in a foundation, then you know that oftentimes neutrals can lean a little bit more warm, and that's the case with the Gucci. So it does lean slightly warm, but you can see as it dries down, it kind of neutralizes a little bit. So I'm gonna show you right now a swatch of this, and I'll show you how it dries down. So here is the Gucci. Just gonna spread this out here. So this is 120N, and let's just do some color comparisons while we're at it. This is the Guerlain L'Essentiel foundation in 00N, and you can see here that they are pretty similar in color. The Gucci is slightly warmer. Taurate Dewdrop in 1.5. You can see that this one is definitely a lot lighter, more of an ivory shade here. Clé de Peau Radiant Matte Fluid Foundation, and this is shade I10. And again, this one is more of an ivory shade compared to the Gucci as well. You can see it's a little bit lighter and it's more neutral. We have the Suku Cream Foundation in shade 110. And this one can often appear a little bit too yellow for me on my skin, but you can see that it is more ivory based than the Gucci. Chanel Les Beige in shade BR12. And here's that. Cojindo Aqua in 002. And the last one we're going to look at is the Cojindo Moisture Foundation in 012. And you can see that this one is going to be lighter, more ivory. So here you go overall. Now over here, the foundation has dried. Let me show you a little bit of fresh application. So we're looking here at the dried one versus the fresh liquid. So there is a little bit of oxidation, but it's not that bad. You can see though that it definitely gets a little bit warmer as you wear it. But I think on my skin, after it dries down, it actually ends up, I use sheer light layers, but I do think that it ends up working out okay. So I think this color ends up being okay for me. Is slightly warm. And I feel like in person, when I turn my head certain ways, I see a little bit of that extra warmth. But when I'm looking, for example, in the camera or in a photo or something, it's not as noticeable. So it's kind of weird. It's like a little backwards, like I can catch glimpses of the warmth as I move, but I don't see it so much sitting still. So I hope this was helpful. Starting from the top here, we have the Gucci Foundation 120N, Guerlain L'Essentiel in 00N, Taurate Dewdrop in 1.5. Then we have the Clé de Peau Radiant Fluid Matte in I10, the Suku Cream Foundation in 110, the Chanel, this is the Healthy Glow Les Beige in BR12. Then we have the Cojindo Aqua in 002. And the Cojindo Moisture in 012. So in summation, I think both the Gucci primer and the Gucci foundation are very nice products and I like them, but they are not loves for me. So they won't be making it to my favorite list, but they are definitely something that I will use and enjoy. And I do think that it gives a very nice finish and it looks very kind of sophisticated on the skin. So I do really appreciate the finish of these. And that's it. So I hope this review was helpful. I would love to know your thoughts down below and whether or not you have used either of these products yet or you're planning on picking these up. One more thing I wanted to mention is I did try a few different application methods. I applied the foundation with my fingers, with a couple of different brush styles, and I did not use a sponge, but I did test it out in those different ways. And I think the foundation applies beautifully with all of them. One thing I would note though is that it dries quickly. Again, these are both more on the watery side, and as such, they're going to evaporate rather quickly. So you want to work one side at a time. Don't put a lot of dots on your face and then go to try to brush them out, because you will see marks where it dries. So definitely work in small amounts at a time. And that would be my only recommendation there. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you next time. Have a great day and stay safe and healthy.